You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We're not going to beat around the bush tonight. There is no wiggle room for the Democrats in the House or the Senate suffering from the lowest approval ratings they have ever faced, ever. And not just from the entire American body politic, but from within. The approval rating for Democrats in Congress among Democrats is down to 49%. That's horrible. That is horrible, horrible. And it doesn't get any better after the actions Democrats have taken today. There are two Democrat judges, one a county judge from New Mexico, and one a federal district judge in Milwaukee, who have been arrested by the feds for what? For, maybe kind of scurrilous, questionable things? No, for some pretty damning stuff. And if you're wondering, wait a minute, didn't they just double down on the whole MS-13 situation? Didn't they just do the absolute, complete self-humiliation that was saying this was just a Maryland father, just a Maryland man and a husband who just was kicked out of the country? Horrible, horrible. And then it turned out, the guy had MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles and endangered his child, the one that he was going to pick up from school when they sent him off to the Hootskow. Well, they're doing the exact same thing now. The exact same thing. I mean, almost by the book. Let's dig into it. First of all, in Doña Ana County, near Las Cruces in New Mexico, Magistrate Judge Jose Joel Cano had his home raided on February 28th. And the feds arrested 23-year-old Venezuelan national Christian Ortega Lopez. Now, what was going on with this particular guy, this Christian Ortega Lopez? Well, he was a very obvious member of the Venezuelan gang and terrorist organization, according to the State Department, Tren de Aragua. So, what was going on? Was he just found in there because he was, like the police were tracking him down and he broke into a house to hide from police? No, not at all. Cano, the magistrate judge in New Mexico, was hiding this individual, this Venezuelan gang member, in his home, allegedly to help him evade federal authorities. Now, what else do we know about this guy? Well, we know that back in 2023, the last time this Ortega Lopez Venezuelan gang member was caught, he was caught coming across the border, scaling a barbed wire fence. And then after he was grabbed, the Biden administration let him go because the detention centers were too overcrowded. Did they let him go into, Mexico or send him back to Venezuela? No. The only thing we send to Venezuela is money in the Biden administration. And they just let him go into the United States so that a Democrat judge in New Mexico could hide that man in his home. Well, yesterday, the feds, after the New Mexico Supreme Court stripped Judge Cano of any law certification, forbade him from practicing from any bench in the state. I got to tell you, what was I expecting? I wasn't expecting a whole lot. I thought, all right, well, they've barred him. All right, maybe a civil charge might come up eventually. Nope, the feds got to him yesterday and arrested both Judge Cano and his wife for not only aiding and abetting a Venezuelan gang, but keeping this guy in his house. That's obstruction of justice. Again, one of the biggest reasons that illegal immigration is not just a civil offense, as those on the left like to pretend, but is also a criminal act, is that once you have come into the United States unlawfully, there is then the process of evading federal forces who are looking to you. If you evade immigration officials, and if you bust out of whether the normal processes of immigrating into this country or the normal processes of registering for taxes and other things, and you hide from officials in this country, or you help someone hide from officials in this country, you're violating federal law. And that was only one of the two judges. Earlier this morning, I saw the same post, or excuse me, I should say right around noon, I saw the same post that a lot of other pundits and kind of news hawks who keep our eyes on the social media feed saw. FBI Director Kash Patel released a post on Truth Social that said, and I quote, "Just now, the FBI arrested Judge Hannah Dugan out of Milwaukee on charges of obstruction after evidence of Judge Dugan obstructing an immigration arrest operation last week. We believe Judge Dugan intentionally misdirected federal agents away from the subject to be arrested in her courthouse, Eduardo Flores Ruiz, allowing the subject, an illegal alien, to evade arrest. Thankfully, our agents chased down the perp on foot, and he's been in custody since, but the judge's obstruction created increased danger to the public. We will have more to share soon. Excellent work, FBI Milwaukee." I've met a few of the FBI agents in Milwaukee. It's one of only 3 FBI bureaus that I've actually had the chance to talk with some of the agents. And it's true. The FBI Milwaukee team is excellent. And then FBI Director Patel deleted the tweet, and speculation flew like crazy. So we reached out, the Daily Caller, friends of ours reached out and confirmed that, yes, in fact, the FBI, the U.S. Marshals had arrested this judge in Milwaukee. And then everything got insane. Everything got insane. Because the left decided that now was the time to decide that this judge wasn't actually trying to do any kind of obstruction. She just, there was one analyst who said, just spotted the federal agents. They were in the same hallway, and they just walked. She didn't really direct the guy out a side door and off into the distance trying to get him away from federal agents. No, she just walked out with him after some type of immigration hearing. I find it suspicious. According to the complaint, Dugan assisted Eduardo Flores Ruiz, an undocumented Mexican immigrant, to avoid being arrested by federal immigration officials at the Milwaukee County Courthouse after he appeared in her courtroom for a pretrial conference on April 18th. What's he in the courtroom for? 3 misdemeanor battery counts. Now, here's where things get really disturbing. After the feds captured the individual, on his phone, they found 2 photos of what? 2 of his decapitated victims. So what is it in fact that this judge tried to do here? Well, let's let Attorney General Pam Bondi explain.
And to set the stage for you and Sandra, this was truly horrific. This guy was in court being prosecuted by a state prosecutor for domestic violence battery. He had beat up 2 people, a guy and a girl, hit the guy 30 times, knocked him to the ground, choked him, beat up a woman so badly they both had to go to the hospital. And John, it's so rare for victims to want to cooperate. They wanted to cooperate. They were sitting in the courtroom with the state prosecutor. The judge learns that ICE was outside to get the guy because he had been deported in 2013, came back in our country, commits these crimes, charged with committing these crimes, victims in court. Judge finds out. She goes out in the hallway, screams at the immigration officers. She's furious, visibly shaken, upset, sends them off to talk to the chief judge. She comes back in the courtroom. You're not going to believe this. Takes the defendant and the defense attorney back in her chambers, takes them out a private exit and tells them to leave. While a state prosecutor and victims of domestic violence are sitting in the courtroom.
That's very blatant obstruction of justice. That is wildly overt. Now, how is the left responding to this? So a lady that I know, Ann Jacobs, she's the chair of the Wisconsin Elections Commission. She's also this really just scummy personal injury attorney, like a real ambulance chaser. I knew her back from my time when I was in Wisconsin. So she pulls up the complaint and says, let's actually discuss the actual charges here, and starts to make the claim. She says, per the complaint, the judge apparently sent the man to the public hallway where law enforcement was waiting. Then what happens? The 2 DEA agents see him and do nothing. They don't arrest him. They don't do anything. So she's trying to make the case that the judge basically didn't know anything, didn't do anything, didn't say anything. But you'll notice that Pam Bondi pointed out that this woman, this judge, came out of the courtroom and basically started yelling at the ICE agents, and then sent someone else to go talk to the ICE agents, not the DEA agents. to ICE agents who were there for the guy. The DEA agents weren't there to arrest this man. They didn't have the warrant. I don't know if you guys know this, but cops have these lists of orders. They're called warrants. Different federal agencies have warrants for different individuals. You're going to find lots of different kinds of federal agents at different major metropolitan area courthouses because there's a lot of cases and trials and pretrials going on at the same time. If you've ever seen the Milwaukee courthouse, it's huge. So, hilarious stuff. We'll be back in just a second to talk about the media reaction over on the radio side. Got to send you folks off to commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Now, Donald Trump did respond to this, and it's pretty on par. He shared a tweet from Chaya Reichik from the Libs of TikTok team. And since then, Trump's been fairly quiet on the matter because he's in Rome getting ready for Pope Francis' funeral. And there's a little bit more to talk about Trump a little bit later on in the show, especially regarding Russia and Ukraine. But the accusations right now are falling on Trump that apparently he's created some type of pseudo-Nazi state. And here we are, the fascism is here. They're arresting judges. Oh, no. Quick, get my pearls, get my smelling salts. It's fantastic. That's not where the justice stops for the day. In case you were wondering, New York Attorney General Letitia James, the lady who turned a federal charge that the federal government refused to act on into 32 felony counts on some type of weird business fraud case that had never been tried in New York before, had never really been tried anywhere like that before. That individuals who despised the former president of the United States in the courtroom said, there's no charge here. This makes no sense at all. The lady who ran on finding Trump for something, going to find something that Trump has done, and I'm going to go after him and take him down. Well, it appears that the evidence of her exceptionally potent mortgage fraud is piling up. And now, the Attorney General's office of New York, now that the Department of Justice is basically getting ready to hit her with some serious charges and a very interesting court trial series, I'm sure. Her office has hired to defend her Hunter Biden's lawyer. Hunter Biden's lawyer. Incredible. Incredible. What a move. I don't know if I would have even put that in a ballpark of things. That's the kind of joke one makes, like among friends. Oh, I bet she hires Hunter Biden's lawyer. Ha, ha, ha. And then they go and they do it. Now, what kind of stuff has been piling up evidence-wise? Well, her attorney now claims that the Virginia Property Declaration, aka when she said, oh, I live in Virginia to get these weirdly low mortgage rates, which is super duper illegal. Oh, that her declaring that one place her property that she never lived, oh, that was a mistake. Oh, anybody can accidentally declare a place they've never lived as their primary residence. Come on. It's not even a good argument. It gets worse. He claims that her Brooklyn property functions as a 4-unit residence, even though the certificate of occupancy, just 2 weeks before she bought it, designated it as 5 units. Now, I do that all the time. Our particular house has a certain number of bedrooms and bathrooms, but I walk around telling everyone that it's actually a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, so that I get lower mortgage rates because it's a lesser property. So this means that she may not only be lying on her mortgage application, she may also be lying to get lower property taxes, which is also very illegal. And by the way, property taxes, of course you all know this, property taxes in New York are freaking insane. And that's coming from a guy broadcasting out of a state where currently we're getting screwed over on our property taxes. How do you think that the people of New York feel watching this? The Attorney General of New York lying possibly to get out of property taxes. Incredible, incredible stuff. Every document, every misrepresentation, every omission, every one possible provided James with direct financial benefit. So here's the rub. So if you wanted to make the case that, well, she just made a lot of mistakes because she didn't know what she was doing, questionable. All of the mistakes just happened to turn out in her favor. Wow! Just amazing how it just happens to be a 1-for-1, batting 1,000 on accidents in favor of you. We're going to be back in a second to talk about the media's reaction to all of this, and it is precious. It's going to be fun. We're going to grab the radio folks back from commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
The reactions. Whenever you're doing a breaking show kind of at 7 after the news of the day, which again, for those who are catching the podcast version of this later, or maybe you're catching this on one of our syndication radio partners who's airing it an hour or two after the live airing, you have to kind of scramble at about 4 to 5 to try to get all of the clips that are coming in from the beginnings of the evening news shows. And boy, are we spoiled for choice. Because instead of saying, wow, this looks a lot like when we jumped the ball on the MS-13 guy, Abrego Garcia, maybe we wait a second. Did the Democrats do that? No! It's floor it now. And boy, are they flooring it. So first of all, Cavalier Johnson, the mayor of Milwaukee, a man whose abilities to tie his own shoes are, in fact, in question. Here's his assessment of, again, a very clear, if the video, because there's video evidence, everything in a federal courthouse is recorded. Everything in a county courthouse this size is recorded. One would believe there's probably video evidence of this, but here's the mayor of Milwaukee coming out to say something different.
Defendant is ordered. There'll be a court appearance. That didn't happen in this case. I think what happened here was just showboating. They're just trying to have this show of force, and in the process of doing this in a courthouse where people need to go for court proceedings, they're scaring people away from participating in the process. So if they are witness to a crime or something of the...
I'm sorry, hang on a second. Did this man just make the case that the reason that this is bad, that a judge was arrested for violating the law, the reason that it's very bad the feds showed up to arrest an individual for obstructing federal agents enforcing federal law. The problem is that's going to scare other illegal immigrants from coming to the courthouse? I mean, hang on a second here. What exactly are you saying? Are you saying that a lot of illegal immigrants in Milwaukee County are lawbreakers? That they may perhaps have other criminal acts that the feds might show up to pick them up for? Because that's all the people that Tom Homan and Immigration Customs Enforcement have shown up for, and those who are trying to obstruct. It's a wild claim by the mayor of Milwaukee. That is wild. Now, the corporate media has taken this and they have run with it. And I don't want to say they've run with it like someone who has perhaps taken the bowl of cookies from the kitchen counter and now they're going to sprint to try to get away. No, this is like the kid who grabs the object that's tied to a string, or the individual who goes into a phone store and they grab the phone that's like tethered to the counter and they try to run with that. Because the whiplash is going to be incredible. Mark my words. Here's MSNBC. The anchor is... She's so excited to do this story. She's trying to do almost the transatlantic William Shatner pauses while she delivers this.
Have taken the extraordinary step to arrest a judge for allegedly obstructing an immigration arrest. Let's get right to NBC's Gary Grumbach, who has been trying to work on getting this reporting for us. What do we know?
So what we know right now is that over the past several days and weeks, we've seen videos of people being arrested at courthouses by Department of Homeland Security officials when they show up for hearings to adjudicate their immigration status.
Okay, so quick question, boys and girls. Are they being arrested for A, not being citizens of the United States, or B, arrested for other violent crimes? I'll give you a bit of a hint. It is 100% of the time one of those two. Oh, they're showing up to court. Man, I can't believe that the feds would do that. That they would show up to arrest a person when they know where they are. As opposed to what? Showing up when they don't know where they are? Oh man, I showed up at this random Wendy's and the guy I was looking for wasn't there. Well, did the guy say he was going to be there? No, I just thought Wendy's is a place people like to be. Yeah, maybe he's going to be there getting a Frosty. Incredible.
That is something we've seen over and over again over the past several weeks. Now, veteran circuit court judge up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, her name is Hannah Dugan. She's now being accused of trying to help out an undocumented immigrant avoid arrest. And I want to read to you FBI director.
Oh, they're just trying to help somebody. And by the way, that's what the Associated Press said. Oh, she was arrested for just trying to help a man. Here we go. Maryland man. You've seen Maryland man. Now get ready for Milwaukee man. And I don't mean a purveyor of the tools. Milwaukee man. Oh, just trying to help a man out. Just being a good Samaritan. Just out there giving him a little nudge away from federal authorities while she distracted him with someone else. Man, what is this country coming to? What? I mean, what, we can't, hide a violent wife beater and strangler from federal authorities anymore? Okay, I thought this was America. What are they going to ask me to do next? Show up with my ID to vote? CNN didn't do much better. And,
This is her courtroom, Boris, and she's in control of her courtroom. We've never had a case like this. The only one that resembles it is one in which the judge took actual steps to deceive and prevent ICE from coming in. She handled it.
Wait a minute here. We've never seen a district court judge arrested in the court. Yes, we have. Several times in the United States, when judges have broken the law, they have been arrested. Judges are not some special class of it's her courtroom. Oh, it's her court. She wants to commit a felony. I mean, who are we to say otherwise? After all, it's her courtroom. Gosh, no one has read the Constitution whatsoever. No one has even decided to peruse, even briefly, the document that outlines what the powers are. If a judge violates the law, what, there needs to be some type of special process? When Senator Bob Menendez took solid gold bars from Egypt, and I do mean solid gold bars. I had the privilege of investigating that particular story, and in very, very rustic Arabic, communicating with a couple of officials from Egypt who told me just how much this dude had taken. And when they went to arrest Bob Menendez, they just showed up and arrested Bob Menendez. That's a senator. If you break the law, I thought, wait a minute. I thought no one was above the law. That's what we were all tweeting a little bit. Oh, nobody's above the law. Come on, even if Trump gets his wife's underwear drawer raided by the FBI under Biden. Oh, I mean, come on. That's just that nobody's above the law. No longer on network TV because he's untalented, Don Lemon decided to get extra theatrical about this. I figure this one will at least be up for a Tony.
Is this what we've come to? A judge being arrested by the FBI? A judge in Wisconsin was arrested.
So first of all, he skips right past it. And he said, is this what we've come to? Arresting a judge? Oh, a Wisconsin judge arrested. Because the statement arresting a judge left to hang there is, well, did the judge commit a crime? Anyone can be arrested in the United States. If they have committed a crime, then yeah, they should be arrested. I know that a lot of these Hollywood and coastal elites seem to think that they're above being arrested and they get to go to like really nice cushy prisons or just do community service or have an ankle bracelet on while they drink Mai Tais. No. Also, again, the theatricality of the camera zooming in. Like, he's really passionate about this, but he has to get like the Instagram influencer shot down first.
Arrested by the FBI. They're accusing her of at least misleading ICE agents or throwing them off the trail of someone that they deem to be an illegal alien, as they call them, or
deemed to be an illegal alien? The dude's not a citizen. He crossed into the United States illegally. He was deported once before. Oh, they claim to be an undocumented, whatever they call them, They are just going as hard as they can, as fast as they can. And if they think that right now, this is the move, that this is going to help them in the eyes of the American public, yeah, slice that 24% approval rating in half, please. This is going to be a blast. Radio crew will catch you in a second. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast. Over at Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, those Ivy League institutions, well, things aren't going very well there either. Because you see, they have participated in perhaps one of the oldest traditions of the Ivy Leagues, which is kicking Jews out of buildings. I mean, man, when it comes to kicking the Jewish people and people who aren't the right shade of white and money out of nice buildings. New England country clubs like the one Senator Whitehouse had membership in for ages, and the Ivy League schools, man, nobody beats them. So Harvard University, along with Yale and Princeton, have decided to respond to students, international students' visas being canceled, students who are openly praising the terrorist actions of Hamas and calling for the destruction of the United States. Again, they don't have a right to be here. They don't have the same rights to free speech with a visa that citizens of the United States have. If there's someone in the United States who wants to say death to America and praise Hamas and praise ISIS and the Houthis and burn American flags, as an American citizen, you have the right to do that. If you're not a citizen, you don't have that right. It does not apply to you. And the Trump administration wants to make it clear to these universities, if you're going to take federal dollars, if you are going to take taxpayer money, as Harvard, Yale, and Princeton do, they're private, but it's private with air quotes around it because, again, they're taking big sums of money from the Fed. Well, then you're going to have to abide by the Civil Rights Act. And if you don't, then the money is cut off. Well, Jake Tapper, he's losing it. He's, this is a slippery slope. After all, if they don't give tax money to discriminatory practices, what's next? Allowing black students at the school? What, are they going to send the National Guard in to escort students to class? It'd be horrible. Jake Tapper.
Well, it's a real slippery slope, right? I mean, Trump does this to Harvard. What's President, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez going to do for a conservative school?
So I'll answer this question. I don't need the panelists to jump in here and answer it. This already happened. It was called Bob Jones versus the United States. Bob Jones University, which is a small Congregationalist Christian university, in the 60s and 70s had a policy that did not openly endorse interracial marriage. Interracial marriages were not allowed to be held on campus. They weren't promoted or praised, and they were sued. They were a private university that took federal dollars. And it turned out, after going through the courts, that Bob Jones was in the wrong. And if you're going to take federal dollars, then you have to play by federal rules. If you don't want to play by federal rules and never even possibly be questioned, don't take any federal money whatsoever. This is how Hillsdale College in Michigan does it. And does it, may I say, quite well. They have a policy. We don't take any federal money at all. We don't take any grant money. And we try to be extremely transparent so that people know exactly what they're paying for up front. And the federal government can't say boo. And other universities out there that may take Pell Grant money, they may take, small grants here and there. They may allow certain things to apply federal dollar-wise or endowment-wise to their university. You have to play by the rules. If you don't like that, then you need to limit the size of the Department of Education. And Candace Owens, whose hobbies include eating gravel, are not really any better on this, but we'll have to get back to that later because it's time for a touch of that classic mailbag. So we'll see you in just a second. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Mail time. Mail time. Mail time.
On the Tony Kinnett Cast.
All right, a couple of quick notes here. We've got a lot of excellent questions that have come in this week, very prevalent to the news here. The first question that I've got is from Craig. Did you see the interview that Ben Shapiro did with Volodymyr Zelensky? And if so, what were your thoughts? I did see the interview, and I listened to it and was a little bit surprised and yet not surprised at all to learn pretty much nothing. And by the way, I felt the exact same way, but from a slightly different angle when I saw Tucker Carlson go to Moscow and interview Putin. And before, those of you out there get a little up in arms, allow me to explain. Eastern Europeans, if there was one stereotype that is more true than almost any other stereotype, will get extremely aggressive about history that they have made up. And then they will ramble about it for 3.5 years without taking a breath. So Putin did this when he was talking to Tucker. So Tucker asked him a question, and then Putin proceeded to take like 15 minutes of the scheduled interview to talk about, anything, super duper important. He decided to invent a completely false history that was 100% fictional about the Russian Empire and its glorious march through time. Here's what that looked like.
Still, they collaborated with Hitler and engaged together in the partitioning of Czechoslovakia.
But may I ask you, you're making the case that Ukraine, certainly parts of Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, is in effect Russia, has been for hundreds of years. Why wouldn't you just take it when you became president 24 years ago? You have nuclear weapons, they don't. If it's actually your land, why did you wait so long?
I'll tell you. I'm coming to that. This briefing is coming to an end. It might be boring, but it explains many things.
So he's like, well, I'll get to that. But first of all, here's the end of my Russian history series. Zelensky did the exact same thing to Ben Shapiro.
All working? Yes.
Yes, all good.
So Ben asks all of these questions.
Excellent.
I want to start by asking you about the meeting that you had in the Oval Office. How do you feel that you could have handled things better with the president and vice president?
I was excited to hear that answer. And do you know what he then did? He rambled for 10 minutes about nothing at all connected to that. At all. And so what I walked away from those two meetings with, an idea of is that Putin and Zelensky are not honest people at all. I know, shocker. Eastern European nations aren't honest about foreign policy. Oh no, next you're going to tell me that the French people are bad at war. Oh, wow. Incredible. All right, moving along. This is from Henry K. What should the minimum sentences for the judges being arrested currently? They should be the maximum amount of jail time for the crimes of which they were arrested, which is aiding and abetting. I think that the idea people are really aggravated, and so they're like, get them for high treason. Not actually necessarily what high treason means, but I do think that you should simply prosecute them as any other person out there who commits the crime of aiding and abetting, of obstructing justice. Now, Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel have made it very clear that the rules in the books must be enforced, and then, of course, strip them from practicing law. I do think there should be an additional investigation, though, into the communications they've had over the last couple of weeks. Because I would be a little bit wary of the idea of whether or not judges are, being particularly clean on their communications over the last. The timing's a little bit suspect in this one, just because from all sides, it's always interesting to see when things come up. David Tolley asks, do you have hopes for Trump's trip to Rome being an end to the conflict? There's a statement that Trump released, actually, funnily enough, right before we started the live stream, the news had actually come in that the Trump administration is talking about some parts of the peace deal with Russia and Ukraine being reached. Putin wants a bunch of commitments that take away the sovereignty of Ukraine. And Zelensky wants everything returned back to him, which he has no leverage to do so. I don't think we've made it past those yet. I think that some of the analyses that have been made that basically you have a North and South Korea situation and a permanent armistice kind of a thing, I think that's likely what you'll end up seeing. Eastern Europe does not. Eastern Europe doesn't handle that stuff well. This is from Muffin Stuff, and hey, Tony. Are you wearing the same suit that that Jasmine Crockett was wearing? I made fun of Jasmine Crockett's felt suit yesterday, I believe. And it is, in fact, a very nice, messy velvet suit. Here's what that one looks like, by the way.
I want y'all to know that every day that I walk in those halls, regardless.
Yes, in fact, this is a satinish kind of jacket. There's not really anything special about it. I will say that it's a more respectable shade, and it's not Mickey the Sorcerer's hat blue. But yes, I guess it is in fact a little bit closer than one might have previously expected. This next one, let's see here. What do we got? Absolutely stellar. What do you think that the long-term strategy here for the Dems is. I think that's what the question is trying to ask. What's the long-term strategy for the Democrats? They don't have one, is the short answer to that. They don't have a particular end in sight right now. Right now, the Democrats are trusting on outrage and, oh, the fascism is here, actually driving support, and it's not. It's not. And every Democrat, even AOC and Bernie, who have kind of the best strategy right now, which is starting her presidential campaign way early and running around the country and talking about fighting the oligarchy, even that strategy, they're getting completely wrapped up in yelling about Trump's immigration policies, which are in fact popular. They are. Now, a lot of Americans are really annoyed with how they feel that Donald Trump has fumbled the economy over the last month. That's what the polling data shows. But on immigration, Trump is still really strong. And if the economy smooths out, which it looks like it's going to, then I'm really not seeing the evidence that we're going to see some kind of a dramatic shift against the Trump administration. In fact, it looks like after the 100 days, we're going to see a pretty normal administration carried out and then actually getting some ironing out of norms from the Supreme Court. And that's what's going to need to happen. So those are the kind of things that I those are the kind of things that I have at least kind of felt kind of deep in the bones. We'll let the radio crew head to commercial. And when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about the federal budget and the entire mess that is permanently. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. All right, I will take just a couple of more here. From Tonto Emeritus, what do you think about the Indiana GOP going full California Marxist Democrat? Okay, the answer to this question is going to make no one happy. And when I mean no one happy, I mean no one, not the libertarians, not the traditional conservatives, not the whatever. You have two factions that are currently vying for control of the Indiana Republican Party. It's where I'm broadcasting out of. You have the establishment kind of Bushian Republicans who have been in power forever and have very, very close connections with the lobbyists. And I mean like kissing, hugging, the Indiana development, the IDEC, that lobbying crew, and all of the financial interests from these corporations and special interest parties have basically directed what the Indiana Republican Party has done for a long time, which is somewhat good for the economy, but it's also not. Then on the other side, you have the populists, and those include a lot of the people who are yelling about the property taxes. I would also include a lot of the libertarians in Indiana in this populist group because it's a lot of emotion. And unfortunately, it's a lot of emotion that's not based on fact at all. So you have a group that's not running the state house well at all. And then the other group that is yelling about things that aren't the cause of the problem. So there's a lot of anger. It's like, oh man, why didn't they pass this property tax bill? Well, because they didn't actually come up with a bill that would have addressed property taxes in the long haul. There are certain things in the state that need to be cut funding-wise. And whenever that isn't done correctly, the answer is not, oh, that person is incompetent. Oh, that person is listening to lobbyists. The answer is, oh, they're actually a secret rhino Democrat out to screw over Hoosier. No. But by making that case that is completely made up and silly nonsense, now you give the Bushian side of the party something very easy to smack down. It's really bad optics, it's bad politics, and it's embarrassing. So who's to blame for all of this? The honest answer, which I've said before, is the county officials. The county officials that have suggested as county commissioners that they need 8 secretaries and they have to give money to all of these ridiculous projects. There's no accountability for that. And so just from the local level here, all of the government officials in the state right now, I think that Braun and Beckwith are getting way too much heat on this one. And this actually takes a lot of local action at the county level. And then a common sense bill would be actually cutting Indiana's education budget, mainly the universities. I don't see why Indiana University or Purdue need to drop of the state budget. Why am I paying for IU and Purdue? It's not going to their basketball teams winning championships. So what is it going to? I'm not satisfied with the research projects coming out of IU. And to be completely honest, the way that Purdue's agriculture department and its pharmacology department are currently organized are a waste of my money. So, no, that's the real answer. And, saying that everyone in the party is kind of awful is not always the most popular, but unfortunately that is kind of the idea. I'll answer kind of a half track on that one just for kicks and giggles here. populist but not true conservatives. Populists are not conservative. Populism is a mechanism. It's an emotion. Populists, in a political sense, simply means a group of individuals who believe that things should be different. They believe that there is an end goal that should be different. And so populists then say, I'm not getting the end goal I need. I'm mad about it. So therefore a group must be acting against me. And you have populists on the left and the right. And there's a lot of truth to that. But unfortunately, populism, which is basically a mob rule kind of political party function, it's effective in some kinds of campaigns, but also, I mean, it runs on emotion, which means not actually addressing root causes. It's a kind of a quick fix situation. Think French Revolution instead of the American Revolution. That would be the difference between populism and kind of like a principal function conservatism, which at the moment isn't a thing. We'll be back in a second for the radio crew. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. It's good to be joined by Maya MacGuineas, president of the Committee for a Responsible Budget. And God knows, we need a responsible budget, and it just doesn't look like there are a whole lot of great options on the table. Right before Congress left town last week, the House adopted a budget resolution that does a whole lot of things that Republicans aren't really known for running on campaign promise-wise. Maya, tell us a little bit more about the stage that we've been set here.
So, yeah, this is a huge year in terms of the choices that we're going to make and how it's going to affect the overall national debt, the fiscal situation, which is terrible to get started with. But what we're looking at in the budget reconciliation is different opinions from both the House and the Senate, but everybody who is talking about extending tax cuts or cutting taxes from where they are legally set to be is not talking about offsetting that cost enough. And so by not enough, I mean it will end up adding to the borrowing of this country at a time where what we should be doing is reducing the borrowing. So the Senate bill is actually trillions of dollars more in borrowing than the House bill, with one main reason. They have almost no spending cuts required. Now, keep in mind, and I'm a political independent, but to generalize, Republicans have always said, we want smaller government. The way you get smaller government is you cut spending. The tax bills that we're looking at from both bodies would actually cut taxes and cut spending by much, much less. Out of $86 trillion in spending over the budget window, the Senate bill, the House bill, let's say, would cut $2 trillion out of $86 trillion. The Senate bill would cut $4 billion with a B out of $86 trillion. So it doesn't even register on the decimal point scale.
Right.
So the problem is that all of these, no matter what you pursue, but the House is much more responsible, you're talking about borrowing trillions of dollars more at a time when we can ill afford to do that.
Okay, let's talk about the ill affording to do so here. Just for clarification, when you say borrowing more from whom?
The way that America borrows is when we are spending a certain amount, say $7 trillion, and bringing in a certain amount in revenues or tariffs or other forms, say $5.5 trillion, you have to borrow the difference. That's your budget deficit.
Right.
The way you borrow is the government issues bills, bonds, and notes, treasuries. There are treasury auctions. 2/3 of those are purchased by domestically, and about 1/3 comes from borrowing from abroad. What we're seeing right now is real concerns in the treasury markets because there's not reliable demand for all that we are borrowing. So all these new treasuries that we're issuing, it's not clear that there's enough demand to buy those.
Because the buyers don't think that we're going to pay back that debt.
Well, no, they know that we'll pay it back. We will pay it back. Not paying it back would be defaulting. I suppose there's some concerns about the debt ceiling. But they're right now, because of the trade war and other things, they're a little worried about, okay, can we rely on the U.S. the way we have in the past? Is it going to be the reserve currency? So they're diversifying out of dollars. And in order, because of all the political risk they're seeing here,
worried they're not going to make a return on their investment in purchasing the bonds, et cetera.
Yeah, they want higher returns. And so that's why rates are going up when they should be going down.
in that 1/3 that you talked about on who's doing the buying, one of those agents is, for example, the Communist Party of China, who buys up a lot of those bonds, right? And then I know that Deutsche Bank, I know that Germany has bought a good portion of them. Are there other key European or players around the world who buy up a lot of treasuries when they become available?
Well, the largest holder of assets outside of the U.S. is Japan, and the second largest is with about 1.1 trillion, and the second largest is China with a little under 800 billion. And after that, you have the European, you have oil-producing countries, but the two biggest players are Japan and China.
I knew I was forgetting the biggest one. I was glad you were able to help sweep
it. It always goes back and forth between those two, but Japan for sure now. But as you point out, it's a little concerning to be relying on China to lend us money at the very time we're having a trade war and potentially other kinds of wars with them. Like, we're not the best of friends at the moment, so it's a little bit of a risky dependency right there.
Right, and we could talk about the Chinese situation. I do want to dig into a little bit of the meat here, but not the meat as though we're walking by the butcher window and we're saying that's the meat. I see you get a lot of these policy conversations, especially regarding the budget. We get into the ethereal academic sense really quickly, and we start talking about these lofty terms and what we would like to see. And one side, kind of the more populist side, suggests that we need to cut a little bit of the defense spending. We need to cut foreign aid, even though those are not as big as that side is suggesting. And then the other, probably the more Bushian side of the financial part of the Republican Party, suggests that we need to cut some aspects of entitlement reform. I hear Congress people talking about cutting the defense, about cutting spending in general. Where are these actual cuts going to be manifest? When I call my local rep or my senator, what am I asking him to cut that is actually reasonable and feasible? Because otherwise, if it's not reasonable or feasible, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. The discussion in the political arena and the numbers on the budgetary ledger are in two different universes. And that's perhaps the biggest problem we have. That, like, if you go back to the presidential race, both Trump and Harris were running on proposals that would make the debt much, much worse than it already is, that they would add trillions to the debt under their promises of tax cuts and spending increases, and both of them had both.
Right.
So, yet at the same time, they talk about the importance of fiscal responsibility, but there's no policies that back that up. So,
because Americans like the idea of lower taxes, but like the effects of higher spending.
Yes. I mean, you got it. That's the bottom line, is that's where we are now. It used to be, I've been doing this for long enough that it used to be a period where Republicans really did want to cut spending and Democrats really were wanting to raise taxes. Now, as we can see in how this tax cut bill is playing out, Republicans actually, very, very few of them want to cut any spending. And I'll get into specifics for you in a second. And Democrats, who used to say, okay, we'll pay for things by raising taxes, only want to on the very highest earners, 2% of the population. You can't make a dent in the problem with the limitations they're putting there. And honestly, they spend their time promising not to raise taxes, not to fix Social Security or Medicare, which we can talk about, not to cut spending. And they pretend waste, fraud, and abuse is going to fill that hole. And I'm the non-political person here to say, like, that is so destructive. It's not going to fix this problem. We're going to have to talk about real policies.
I'll be the political person, on the right side of the aisle that jumps in and sounds a little bit of the alarm or casts a little bit of doubt here that we get alienitis. So we've gone from thinking a million was a lot to thinking a billion was a lot to now thinking that trillion is a lot. And we really don't have a good framework, at least in how we picture numbers, of the difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion. Totally. And so when you see DOJ issuing their waste, fraud, and abuse, things that Americans didn't know they were spending money on because the details are in fact darker than the broader picture, right, then you might get cut 10 billion and hey, cutting 10 billion, that's excellent. But when you're trillions down, that's like saying, yeah, I'm $1,000 in debt. Here's $10.
That's exactly right. And actually, DOJ is often cutting millions, not billions. And
still good work. Still things that should be paid attention to. Absolutely.
We should cut things no matter, pennies of taxpayer dollars should not be wasted. We should get at everything. But you don't want it to be a distraction from, in the end, we actually do have to look at Social Security, which has promised much more in benefits that can afford to be paid and is headed towards insolvency if we do nothing. Medicare and Medicaid, where there are many ways to improve the efficiency of the program. And that's where you could actually make some real changes that wouldn't have to hit beneficiaries. I don't like to talk about nobody has to do anything. There are no hard choices, because there are. But in the healthcare delivery system, there's a lot of inefficiencies that we could really improve on. Defense procurement, I think defense spending may well have to go up. The world's riskier, but the procurement process, there's so much to be saved from that. So hopefully we can divert funds to better places.
Right, the $40,000 hammers and chairs kind of a situation that procurement and the way that certain bidding processes, are concerned usually get out of hand. We see this in every government office. Before we dig into talking about cutting, the largest chunk of the budget is entitlement spending. Obviously, I know that. The listeners know that. Every person who is a graduate of high school, who's a graduate of third grade, if you really pushed them on it enough, they would tell you that they know that. We've talked about it for decades. It's been called the third rail, right? Because if you've got a train track on a subway, you've got the outside two rails that are guiding the train, and the inside's that electric rail that's giving the power. And they call it the third rail because if you touch that rail, zap, in this case, the political campaign is dead, because Americans love their big spending programs. Because they deserve it. No one else deserves it, but I deserve the big government program, because humans are selfish, me included, you included, all
You're
of us.
You're channeling my father, too, who protests every time I talk about this. That's true.
Absolutely. And understandably so, because they did pay into it all their lives. Now they want the gravy they were promised on the train. The issue is, and I want to see if I'm off the rails, no pun intended, on this, I don't think this is the third rail anymore. I think that what you talked about, which is the Americans demand low tax promises and deliveries, and then they demand high spending programs that aren't touched. It's two rails. And we're standing in the middle of this train track with an oncoming express train that, you're right, there are hard choices to make, because trains don't just stop on a dime. You have to apply a lot of power to the brakes. It has to slow way down. Sorry, former teacher, I think, in analogies.
So many good ones that you've put into this.
It's one of those things. I want to start making palatable the cuts we are going to have to make. We've got a person who's pre-diabetic, all right? They need to make changes before they are locked into type 2 diabetes and there's no going back. It's not going to be fun. Nobody likes diet food. I don't like diet food, but we got to start introducing it into the diet, or the economy is in for, you think world of hurt. We haven't even begun to imagine what's coming.
You made so many good points there. Like, we should have started this, honestly, 20 years ago, when the trustees of Social Security and Medicare were warning us that the trust funds were going to...
but Bush was evil for wanting to privatize Social Security and actually have your money doing something,
So we've waited so long, it's going to be much more painful than it has to be. But let's start now. Let's not wait until the last minute. There are sensible reforms that you can look at. We have what I think is super fun, but it's a Social Security reformer on our website where you can go and you can pick your own choices. There's no one right way to do it. There's lots of ways. The only thing that's wrong is to do nothing any longer. But we do have to rethink some of these programs. My father, who does get very mad, keep your hands off my Social Security, he'll say, but there's one thing that would be helpful for people to understand is they get much more out of the system than they paid in. And the reason is life expectancies are so long. Not everyone does. If you die at 65, retirement age is not till 67 at this point. So but most people live much longer, and that's why the system can't afford all the benefits promised. We should talk about raising the retirement age for younger people.
Now, I will interject here, because this is where I think that the Bushian side of the Republican Party, or really the establishment sides of both parties here, right? Those who have been in the industry forever, who understand the numbers, who understand the industries more, they have the content knowledge, they have the experience, and the populists are hotheads, because populists are by nature an emotional movement. That's not a critique. That's how politics works. The issue that I found is that, and you see this right now. So if someone comes out and says, hey, maybe we need to raise the age of retirement, populists on both sides of the aisle come out of the woodwork and say, well, you just hate old people. You just hate...
And the AARP egging them on.
Right. And so the issue that I have is that you have a lot of gaslighting that goes on, but you don't really see the establishment crew actually willing to go out and do the tough interview and say, you know what, you're wrong. And actually being willing to engage in the culture war of this issue. Because there's an aspect of it.
That's part of what we're trying to do, which is we have to build a bipartisan group of members, because they have to give each other cover and go out and
but they hate each other.
That's not always true.
Let me rephrase that. The populist groups, which are growing larger in both parties, desperately despise each other. And the only things they can agree on, like when you see like the credit card interest reform, and you have like AOC and then, a populist Republican opposite come together and say, yeah, let's ban credit card interest rates. It's like, my goodness, that's not good bipartisanship.
Right. Usually
I don't mean to push you.
is also to find ways to borrow. But right. I do think our politicians have not been telling us the truth about Social Security and Medicare. They've been making promises that really make people who depend on the programs vulnerable. I think a group of members coming out and saying, we're going to tell you the truth. They don't have to jump right into the fixes, but at least say, hey, this is a problem, and everyone who's pretending it's not is lying to you. I think that's how you start the discussion. We have to have this discussion. We cannot sweep it under the carpet. People are going to have real pain if we continue to do that.
So the reason that I'm kind of pushing this issue is because I like the goal, and we've seen this in the past at work. The problem is that I don't really see a bifurcation. You hear both sides talk about the uniparty, and they're talking about the older, more established members on both sides of the aisle who more praise status quo antebellum because they know how to keep that moving, right? You know, you have a car that you've owned forever, even though it has a lot of problems, you know how to keep that thing puttering along. The problem that I see with kind of bipartisan aims, I'm not worried about how you're going to get the left and the right of the establishment to work together. My concern is, how do you, with your Republican colleagues, or you with your Democratic colleagues, how do you reach out to the Jasmine Crockett's and the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Gavin Newsoms and the J.D. Vances and say, we need you in this also?
So I think the long shot of an answer, but you have to try, is that if we can get it to be agreed that this is a problem, if people will understand that if we don't do anything for Social Security, then we are going to have across the board benefit cuts for every single senior there is of 20% and more over time. If we can agree there's a problem, then okay, each one of you put your solution. And hopefully we can at least then, instead of saying like, here's how I'd fix the program, and some panderer say like, I think you're pushing grandma over the cliff, that's not a fair fight. We need everybody to have to own up that there has to be a fix.
What you're suggesting, and what you're suggesting here is that, there was a thing that Dennis talked about for a long time, that in order to get someone to actually brush their teeth, show them a picture of gum disease. Because once you actually show them this is what's coming if you don't brush your teeth.
I'd love to see, like, let's do the Netflix movie of what happens if Social Security hits the wall and what that does to seniors. Because that's the promise our politicians have given us right now. We're not fixing it. We're not talking about it. Okay, a lot of people are going to suffer, and that's unconscionable. So I think that's the first step.
I think you're not wrong. And I appreciate your going on this little back and forth. Well, really not back and forth as much as really diving into the meat here of what we're actually going to do about it, because we're on the other end in the 2020s of this age of marketing where everything was kind of put up in platitudes that people aren't really buying anymore. And I think that something that I, again, appreciate about the Committee for a Responsible Budget is you guys recognize the crisis. I think you have plans to get there. And so the buy-in process can't necessarily be taken for granted as it might have been by those listening to NPR or, tuning into Newt Gingrich giving a, speech on C-SPAN 35, 40 years ago.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
So unfortunately, the FCC clock is currently coming at my kneecaps. So we got to wrap this one up. Maya MacGuineas, president of the Committee for a Responsible Budget, crfb.org. Go there and be annoying about it. We need it. All right, now let's do just a bit of bonus tonus here. So I do want to address one thing that we didn't actually get to talk about in detail in that interview, and it frustrated me just a little bit. I absolutely don't care for platitude-based politics. I don't. Campaign slogans, they might work when everyone in the polity knows what the principles will meter out to be. But right now, you actually have a very big tent group on the right and a shell of a big tent group on the left that believe wildly disparate things from each other in their own parties. On the left, you see this with the social aspect of things. So while being very unified on the heavy economic regulation side of things and heavy on the socialism side of things, on culture, they really don't know what to believe. They don't know whether they want to be really culturally libertarian and just do whatever you want, or do they want to be highly structurist, and do they want to separate out society in a caste system of who's more oppressed than the other? And I think that, by the way, imagining that out, Kurt Schlichter, who's been on the show a couple of times, he does a phenomenal job of picturing what a country run by those values would look like. On the right, there's a uniformity on a lot of the cultural stuff. And the traditional conservatism in the culture is starting to become more the norm, so much so that you see a lot of individuals who for example, cultural Christians. You've seen people on the right who are these influencers who they say, well, I don't believe in Jesus. I don't actually believe it was real, or I'm not a Christian or anything like that, but it's culturally good that he's around. So like I would say I'm a cultural Christian, which then you're not a Christian. Sorry. And sitting in a garage doesn't make you a car. But you see kind of a cultural alignment of the idea that conservative values are good on the right. The problem is the economic and the foreign policy sides are like completely separate from each other. And because you have people who articulate that a little bit of economic protectionism is good, a lot of economic protectionism is good, a little bit of free trade is good, a lot or ultimate or universal free trade is good. Foreign policy, intervention, a little bit, a lot of it, what's the goal? That has to be hammered out. And the problem is we are kind of staring down the gun barrel of the impending, what I would argue is actually the collapse of the U.S. economy through hyperinflation. And Maya, while she had a lot of really great things to say, the one thing that we didn't get to dig into is what I actually believe is the true threat to the U.S. economy, which is this idea that everyone is always going to buy U.S. bonds and treasuries, and that's going to prop up the dollar forever. Pretending that's always going to be the way it is stupid. And anyone who tells you that, populist or regulatory, corporatist, traditional, conservative, liberal, who pretends that the United States dollar is always going to be everyone's go-to just because it always has been, is the same kind of person who's going to tell you they're going to keep making buggy whips because, after all, horse-drawn carriages are always going to be here. It's naive. And I don't think that in a time when, again, the entitlement programs are going bigger, the country is growing older, and the bills are going to have to come due for these things, that you do need to actually start illustrating, what are the line items that need to be cut? And I didn't get an answer to that question. I didn't. I asked. I said, what are the line item things? What is it that Republicans, that Democrats, whomever out there, what do they need to cut that was mentioned in the comments. It was called out immediately. What are the line budget items, boom, 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 that need to be cut right now immediately? Doge has listed a lot of them. They haven't been cut. Why? Republicans are in control of Congress. They're in control of the House. They're in control of the Senate. Why isn't it getting snipped away? Speaker Johnson has made that perfectly clear. He's not really satisfied with things at the particular moment, but also it should be pointed out that Trump has said that the entitlement programs are not going to be touched. That's a problem. That is in fact a problem. Now, again, that's something that the American people don't want touched. So I don't blame Trump, because Trump is doing what the people of the United States want him to do, which is not touch Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. In fact, he's making them stronger. He just, I think, announced today that he's doing a digital Social Security card. He's like making Social Security more secure, which is awesome. I don't blame Trump for having the views that he does that people have told him to push on entitlement reform. I blame the Republican congressmen who know darn well this is coming, and they're just whistling, pretending that everything will be fine. And then once it gets here, they'll say, oh yeah, we should have done something about this 20 years ago. And then it'll be too late. So those things aside, just to address what I think is a very good-natured comment. Why the complaints on this? It's only been 100 days. That's true. It has only been 100 days. You have 18 months to get the agenda done. 18 months. After 18 months, campaign season starts. And then the midterms happen. Never, ever, ever, ever wage what your administration is or isn't going to do on a midterm, because what happens right after midterms? The next presidential election cycle. So you have 18 months, it feels like 18 minutes, after the beginning of a new administration to effectuate all the policy that you're going to effectuate. After that, it's over. Politically, it is, because that's how it operates. That's the realism aspect of it. So when I say that I'm disappointed with the Republican Congress, it's because, yeah, you ran on saying you were going to do this, and this. And you've done cool things. The Lake and Riley Act, awesome. Moving forward, hopefully with codifying some of these executive orders into law, needs to happen sooner rather than later. Because political campaign season, as much as we all despise that it will not wait, it won't wait. So those things all said, and I do agree with producer Daniel. The problem is that touching them is political suicide. Well, yeah, it is. And it is, in fact, political suicide. If I go up to an individual and say, you're looking a little fat, maybe diet, they're going to be upset. But if you say nothing and the person has, is right on the cusp of diabetes, and then all of a sudden, presto, type 2 diabetes is here, well, Certain things can and can't be prevented. And I'm just analogizing these things because I think that's usually the most helpful. All right. Let's talk a little bit about Time Magazine real quick, because Time Magazine is, in fact, I guess a shell of itself. Time Magazine did an interview with President Trump, and they asked a question that is exceptionally egregious. So Time Magazine said, the Supreme Court, and they said this to Trump in the little interview they did, the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that you have to bring back Kilmar Abrego Garcia. You haven't done so. Aren't you disobeying the Supreme Court? Boys and girls, this is called a leading question. A leading question is when you say, this is true, it's not. This is true, it's not. So aren't you doing this? Case in point. This is also called the wife-beating conundrum. So there is an old kind of a joke between journalists and lawyers and people who deal with this crap constantly, where you ask someone, hey, how long has it been since you've stopped beating your wife? And no matter how you answer that question, you are admitting to beating your wife. Or, hey, have you stopped beating your wife yet? Now, that's usually how those two things are. And it's, kind of a darker joke and an example, but it is in fact a true point of how facetious and how silly leading questions are. Aren't you defying the Supreme Court? Trump responded, well, that's not what my people told me. They didn't say that it was. They said it was, 9-0. That was something completely different. And that's correct. The Supreme Court has never once ruled that Trump and his administration has to bring Kilmar Garcia back to the United States. They've never said that, not once in the decision. They have to, if given the opportunity, they have to effectuate and facilitate a judicial trial, one last hearing. That's it. That's all they have to do. That can be done anywhere in the world. And by the way, has been done in many different places in the world. You think, well, that's Time Magazine. They're just trying to be really serious on a lot of things. Well, no, because they've also got on Meghan Markle, the disgraced goober who pretends to be part of the royal family in England, who I guess runs a cooking show now that everyone mocks because it's retarded. And here is... I'm so mad about this particular clip because it just is... The idea that Time Magazine would pretend to treat this as serious, that people would care about, is the most astroturfed journalist nonsense. Here's Meghan Markle, again, interviewed by Time, talking about tiny flower sprinkles.
All things to be talking about for Time 100. Let's talk about flower sprinkles. But because I think it speaks to...
Do you hear the rich suburban chuckle? Let's talk about where is summer in Martha's Vineyard, Janine.
To be talking about for Time 100. Let's talk about flower sprinkles. But because I think it speaks to the tiny moments of joy that are so effortless and just create a little bit of magic that we're all craving in our everyday. They're tiny little flower petals that are dried. I started putting them on salads. I started putting them on scrambled eggs. It didn't actually matter. On a yogurt parfait. The level of charm that you find people have when they see these tiny little dried petals is something I can't fully wrap my head around, but
Gosh, I just can't imagine how Time Magazine has gotten so out of touch with the middle of the country. Gee, wow. Man, how are you not ensnared by tiny dried flower petals stretched across your various wealthy dishes? The pain. Oh, so much pain. I did want to talk before we left, because I will get messages if I don't, about Act Blue. So the Trump administration has ordered Act Blue, which is the Democrats' grass funding organization, to be investigated, because it turns out Act Blue is not grass funding. Act Blue is a Democrat donor organization that facilitates money laundering in 3 different ways. Allow me to explain how. Number 1, you have multiple instances of individuals. There's one individual named Matt Vanswall, who has come out repeatedly sharing records that this individual, Matthew Vanswall, has, from Kansas, donated to various Democrats. And he's like, I don't make political contributions. I've never donated through Act Blue for anybody. But that Act Blue is apparently signing donations in people's names. That's very illegal. That's a method of money laundering. Number 2, Act Blue and the Daily Signal helped uncover a good portion of this. is that the Act Blue organization did not ask for verification codes on credit cards or on various purchase tools on the site, which meant that you could essentially donate money through Act Blue from really anywhere in the world, which is illegal. And then that money could then be transferred to a Democrat candidate. The same thing, by the way, also happened with gift cards. So other countries would pay gift cards over to campaigns, and Act Blue would facilitate that. And again, that's foreign election interference. That's very, 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 very illegal. Very illegal. And last but not least, Act Blue also has been caught funding groups responsible for various protests. For example, groups called the Troublemakers, the Disruption Project, Rise and Resist, the Indivisible Project, and Democrat Socialists of America, who openly encouraged individuals in various protests to get violent, to commit arson, to commit acts of domestic terror. So how are the Democrats responding to this? About as you'd expect. Chris Murphy, if anyone out there was undecided on whether Trump is operationalizing a precise, coordinated plan to destroy our democracy so he can rule until he dies, the move to shut down Act Blue, the primary way Democrats' campaigns are funded, boy, that's an admission, should be the final proof point. Oh no, they're arresting judges who have committed crimes. Oh no, they're investigating a group laundering money openly. Oh man, that just proves that Trump is Hitler. We've heard this whole thing again every time. Same song and dance. Trump is a fascist. What is your evidence for this? He arrested someone who committed a crime. No, Trump is a fascist. Well, what did he do? Well, he said that he didn't like what a Supreme Court justice said. You're telling me that Trump, the man who has had a comment ready for any person who has ever criticized him ever in history, who signed Bill Maher's list of insults Trump had thrown at him when Bill Maher visited the White House. You're telling me that guy criticized something you didn't like? No. Gasp. Shock. Shame. Wow. I can't believe it. You got Bernie Sanders out today. He's released a statement. Again, Bernie Sanders and AOC have been doing the only smart thing the Democrats can possibly bring together. The one smart thing. Again, you've got Ken, whatever his name is, and David Hogg, who are currently slapping each other in the face like limp-wristed junior high boys, chair and vice chair of the DNC. You've got Jasmine Crockett trying to tell everyone how ratchet and hood she can be. You've got Elisa Slotkin, who's busy running into brick walls repeatedly up in Michigan. And then you've got Cory Booker dehydrating himself so he doesn't poop during fake filibuster addresses. So Bernie and AOC not doing any of that and going around the country and trying to kind of rally eventual support. It's a smarter political move. So you'd think, wow, they maybe like the MS-13 thing, they'd stay out of it. Well, they didn't stay out of the MS-13 thing. Of course, AOC was like, they're arresting this Kilmar Abrego Garcia from El Salvador, which, was perhaps not the most intelligent thing she could have done, getting super ultra accent heavy. Do we actually have that clip? I feel like I need to see this again. AOC telling the crowd in very, very excited rhetoric about just how extremely Hispanically she could pronounce his name. We'll find the clip and throw it up pretty soon. Bernie Sanders has decided that the extremely intelligent move of potent brilliance is to release a statement already on the arrest of Judge Hannah Dugan. Incredible. Why would you? We don't even know a ton about the case yet. If you're a Democrat who just got embarrassed over the Maryland dad being an MS-13 member, you just got humiliated over jumping the gun here, trying to defend this guy because, if Trump is doing it, then it must be wrong. Okie dokie. All right, here's Bernie Sanders' statement. Let us be clear. Trump's arrest of Judge Dugan in Milwaukee has nothing to do with immigration. This latest attack is about one thing, unchecked power. It is time for my colleagues in the Republican Party to stand up to his growing authoritarianism. And he releases a full-page paper, again, saying essentially the same thing. The latest attack on the judiciary is about one thing, unchecked power. Oh, he's so good. God, I cannot believe it. I'm so busy flying around in my private jet and talking with the young Kamala Harris, who has a slightly bigger bottom, about socialism. And I am going to rule from the grave from my multiple mansions. Yep, that's the move. The last thing that they kind of had, the Democrats are going to completely throw away. Because I guarantee you, again, the individual that the judge was harboring has pictures on his phone of 2 decapitated victims. Like all normal people have. Here we go again. And we'll cut back to all of this on Monday. Thanks very much to everyone who has stopped by this week. Really, really enjoyed. Did AOC's accent get thicker while she spoke? Yes, that's why I'm frustrated I didn't have the clip ready to go. So we'll get it again up. Thanks for stopping by the Tony Kinnett Cast. We'll see you Monday over on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.